Welcome to Duck Season Somewhere podcast. This episode is brought to you by the following sponsors. GetDucks.com, your proven source for the very best waterfowl hunting adventures. Argentina, Mexico, 6 whole continents worth. For 2 decades, we've delivered real duck hunts for real duck hunters. And USHuntList.com, because the next great hunt is closer than you think. Search our database of proven U.S. and Canadian outfits. Contact them directly with confidence. Boss Shot Shell's copper-plated bismuth tin alloy is the good old days again. Steel shot's come a long way in the past 30 years, but will never, ever perform like good old-fashioned lead. Say goodbye to all that gimmicky, high recoil, compensation, science, hype, and hello to superior performance. Know your pattern. Take ethical shots, make clean kills. That is the boss way. The good old days are now. It really is duck season somewhere for 365 days per year. Duck season somewhere takes me year-round to worldwide destinations where I visit with the most interesting people. I'm your host, Ramsey Russell. Join me here to listen to those conversations. Welcome back to Duck Season Somewhere. You know, I've said before, I'll say again, and you'll hear me say it again. I think the future of hunting lies in its past, our history. The past is who we are. Today's guest, Mr. Dale Bordelon, practices the old ways. I'm in Avoyelles Parish, Louisiana. I reckon I'm in Cajun country. I'm probably 30 minutes, 40 minutes south of Catahoula Lake, the famous Catahoula Lake. And I'm right in the middle of some historic duck country. Dale, how are you today?
I'm doing fine, Ram. It's good to have you over here.
You know, I got to wondering that we got a lot of listeners from other parts of the world, not from the deep south, not from Louisiana. And I got to wonder today on the drive over if everybody was going to be able to understand me and you talking. You know, I was on a TV show one time. I can't even remember the name of that television show. And it was a bunch of folks from up north that were the host and stuff like that. And they literally subtitled my accent. I was kind of embarrassed, you know. But I'm glad to be here, Dale. We're sitting in your beautiful shop. I saw it when it was under construction. And you've come a long way. You got a lot of memorabilia in here and a lot of stuff important to you. There's a lot of stuff that speaks to me from a historical context, but I know that speaks to you because I see your picture everywhere.
Yeah, I got a lot of pictures from hunts in the past. And when I'm making calls, I kind of look around and can reminisce the same time I'm in here making calls. And I got more decoys and just kind of my little hunting man cave, I guess.
It is. It's a very nice one. I see some paddles. You know, I see that pile of paddles over there, and I guess about a year ago, my wife walked in the house and said, "You ordered a boat paddle?" I said, "I didn't order no boat paddle." She goes, "Well, it's a boat paddle." And it was a handmade cypress paddle that you made. And so now here today, to double up after we get done podcasting, I'm fixing to go pick me up a pirogue to go with my paddle. And Dale, Tell me this. Where were you born and raised? For anybody that's unaware of or haven't seen you on social media or whatnot, who are you and where are you from? What do you do?
I'm from, it's a little town called Mansur, Louisiana. And that's where we was living until I was about 5 years old. My daddy had a grain elevator and it had several cotton gins. And we lived there till I was about, I guess, 6 years old. Then we moved to a little town called Hesma. That was closer to his work, and he had a brother living over there. And it's a little potato farming community. I would say 9% French, mostly French. In Avoyelles Parish, everybody's mostly French. And I lived there till I got married, and now I live in a little town called Effie, which is not that far from it. And my wife is from this end, so I'm still in Avoyelles Parish. And it's a lot of French people. I grew up with a heavy French background, a lot of culture and hunting and fishing. And when I was a young man, I grew up with these old people. And they made a lot of stuff and used whatever they had. And that's kind of what I incorporate in what I'm doing at my age now.
Like, were those your dad's friends, your granddad's friends, the people you hunted with?
Yeah, my dad would probably he'd be about 95 right now. He's passed on, but he had friends older than him. But I'm talking about 50 years ago, and I know one friend would keep all his duck feathers and make pillows. His wife would put an article to sell duck feathers, and they made pillows and everything. And I grew up in that environment with this person, and it's just something I took a liking to. And every little old thing that I've seen growing up with, I kind of use it now into my hunting. I make my own duck decoys. I'm not a professional at anything, but I like to keep this heritage going. So I make my own decoys and paddles, duck calls. It's not to say look what I made. It's in my heart saying I'm using what my ancestors did.
Right.
And it's a lot meaningful when I kill something with these items that I made, my old dugout, pirogue. It's a lot more fulfilling to go hunting with it.
Which did you make first of all the old artifacts from South Louisiana? Which did you take upon yourself to make first?
Probably the old cane call. I had bought a cane call when I was a young man in the 70s, and I just always admired that how the old French people had, and the reason they used cane calls, it had a hole in it already. They didn't have no machinery, and I thought that was, as a young man, I said, man, that's fantastic, somebody to do that and call a duck and kill a duck. I want to try to do that. So I started at an early age, and I have my original calls in the house, and I got them put up, but that's what got me going. To watch an old man make a duck call by hand with no tools and kill a duck with it fascinates me so much. So that's what I'm driving at.
You know, I never thought about the cane call concept of why they did it. First off, the material was relatively abundant right down here in South Louisiana, but secondly, it already had a hole drilled in it. And so he would just take a piece of wood, make an insert, put two pieces of cane together, tune it up, and he had himself a call. But tell me this, because we just walked through outside there in your shed, and you were showing me how you put together those pieces of call. What material do you start with? What's the basis of those cane calls you're making?
Well, and I use a river cane for the cane itself, and that's very grows all over Louisiana. But the old traditional soundboard in Louisiana, I would say probably 95% is that red cedar. That's what all the old hunters use. It's very easy to carve, and it's water resistant, and it's just a mellow duck sound. And that old bamboo call is a thick housing. It just makes one of the best sounding calls that I can imagine.
Well, I was looking at your materials out there. You out there kind of showing me how you start, and you had different phases of it. I mean, you had a pirogue with some long cut cane. You had some green cane drying in different buckets. You had some dry cane, everything cut to length. I mean, I guess you just go out on a fall day and start cutting cane. Are you looking for a certain size?
Oh, look, I do that right now. If somebody calls me and says, "Look, I got a good cane patch," I'm going.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it's not the right cane. I want to go see, and if it is the right cane, I ask them. I got my machete in my truck.
What makes the right cane?
Well, it takes the river cane, first of all. But I'm going to tell you something. If I cut 10 stalks, I might have 5 good stalks. Not all cane is good. Some of it's a thin wall cane. Mm-hmm. It's not good for coal.
You need thick wall.
So if I cut 10 thick wall, so it takes me, I have to go through a lot of bamboo. Now once I find I'll cut into it and look, then I'll start cutting it up. This stuff takes several months to dry. But I came up, when I get home, I cut it my correct length right off the bat. I take my time, and then I can make a call in probably a month, or maybe 5 weeks, doing that way.
From the time you cut it to the time you're ready to send it to somebody.
I cut it in the lengths I need, so I'm steady looking for cane ahead to keep me a good supply, not to run out.
And then what? Like, okay, so you take your length of cane, and like you were showing me out there in the shop, cane is like a tree. It tapers. You know, it's wider at the bottom, and it's skinnier as you get further up the height. So you cut your cane to length, you barrel, and you insert side, and then how does the process go?
Well, what I do, I make my soundboards. I make my own pegs, my own dowel pins, and by doing that, I'll take my cedar and I'll split it with a hatchet and I cut it.
You ain't going to Home Depot and buying no cedar,
No.
are you? You're cutting it out of woods.
I'm gonna tell you what I did, and I'm gonna be honest with you. I went to the Mississippi River at them locks. If you walk up on the bank, you can find you 5-8 pieces at a day of cedar. Now, if you found a piece, and I found some that's a foot thick, but they're light, I don't want to use that. I want a heavy piece. The heavy piece is real dense, and it makes a hell of a clank. And I'm gonna show you that here in a minute. It makes a good sound. So that's what I'm looking for. So I pick the heaviest piece I pick up because I know that's a dense piece. Then I'll come. Now it's been cut, so I don't have to age nothing. Then I'll come back home and I'll take my axe or hatchet and I'll split it. And I'll split it in sections. Then once I do that, it's very easy to carve that cedar. I have a dowel pin. I have a flat iron with different holes, 7/16, half inch, 9/16.
And you got those different sizes because different pieces of cane are different.
If I take one length of bamboo that's, say, 10 feet long, I might get 6 or 8 calls out of it if I use one size soundboard. By using several different holes and different dowel pins, I can use up that whole cane. So it's a matter of matching pieces till I use it up all. So that's kind of what I do. You might have a 7/16 dowel pin in your call. I might have but they're gonna sound the same. Because I made my own jig to make a soundboard, but it all has the same slope. So no matter the thickness, diameter, they're gonna sound the same.
Well, that's the first thing I noticed in this day and age of all these, especially CNC machine type calls, when you go through the catalogs and stuff like that. And you know, it's like a call. You know, it's that call maker's call because of the uniformity. They all look pretty much alike, you know, especially if they were turned by a machine. But when we were going through your finished calls a little while ago, I noticed there were different sizes, different lengths. I mean, it's just different. Each call is unique unto itself, isn't it?
Everything's different. So whatever soundboard I make, I match it to the little end of the exhaust barrel, I call, and then I match it to the big barrel. So I'm gonna tell you, it's like putting a puzzle together. Is all it is to it.
And then you were showing me how some of these tools you got that you made for boring it out and sanding it out and getting it all smooth and nice. It's all done by hand.
I'm gonna tell you, real call makers, they have it's a tool. Oh, I forgot the name of it. How you call it? It's a tapered bit, and it tapers the barrel to fit for the exhaust barrel.
I've seen that. Yeah.
And they have them on drill presses or on lathes. I made my own out of an easy out with a handle, so I do everything by hand. I don't have no electric tools for that. The reason why, I'm trying to keep my heritage very much alive, and that's how it was done. 100 years ago, they didn't use table saws or skill saws.
They didn't have none.
They didn't have nothing. They went in the Bayou bank with a machete, went back to the old barn and just did whatever they could do.
Yeah.
They was trying to make something to kill a duck.
That's right.
And so that's what I'm trying to keep going.
Well, when you were growing up hunting with these old timers, did you watch? Did you spend any time around them and watch some of those old guys make cane calls?
Rams, I'm gonna tell you, there's a lake where I grew up in Hesma, and it's called Lake Pearl. Most of those people down there, and you would see them. They would come to our work. They wore khaki clothes, and they had old calls in their pocket. They keep like on a string in the hunting seat. They come get feed with us. All those old people, they never wore a lanyard, or they never had 3 or 4 calls. They had a string with one call. And most of those people had one call. If they lived 70 years, they had it for 70 years. They only used one call. Now what they did, I used to watch them modify the soundboard. They might have a call they don't like sounding. They'd sound on it and they'd brag, they'd blow it, say they'd brag about that all day, how good that call. It was there was something they really liked. They got good at it, and it was bragging rights, I guess you could say. So I watched him do that. I know a bunch of people right now. They only had one call. I know a man that bought a call for $1 something. He went on a horse and rode 5 miles. He went to buy him a call. Came home, he didn't buy it because it cost too much.
Oh.
And his sister told him, "Did you buy your call?" I'm talking about this was in the early 40s. "No, it cost too much money." And she said, "You need to go buy that call. That's something you like. You work hard." He went back on his horse, rode 5 miles, bought that call. That was in the early 40s. Now, that man passed away about 2 years ago. He still had that call. He modified it while he could blow it
Like he wanted to say.
like he wanted, and I'm gonna tell you another thing. He would shave his reeds. All the old hunters I knew, they took some sandpaper and they shaved the end of that reed. They said it'd make it mellow, and when they hunt in the woods, they could get real soft. That was a known fact in this part of the country. So an old timer would have one call. He wouldn't have a bunch, and so that's what I do. I have cane calls I make. I have a bunch of calls. I have a Bayou beast calls. When I go hunt with my old decoys, I have one bamboo call, and that's our tradition. They didn't run out and buy a call every year. They was poor, and these people was killing ducks to sell. That where I grew up.
Market hunters.
There was market hunters, but there was in an era. There was in an era where they could kill 100 ducks a day. I'm gonna tell you a little story. There's an old man that told me the other day in the 1930s. He knew a friend. He was a market hunter where I'm from. He said he killed he had an order for 100 ducks. So it was a good day in the fall. It was cool, and there was a rich man come and pick up 100 ducks. He had 100 ducks cleaned and put in his bedroom on his bed and opened the window where the north wind could keep them chilled. They didn't have ice chest or nothing. That old man came pick up those 100 ducks. He handed that this old fellow was poor, never had much money. He handed him a $100 bill. He didn't say nothing. The man took his 100 ducks and left. When that man left, he was worried. He went to his neighbor's house. He showed him that $100 bill. He said, "Is this real? I never seen this before." The man said, "That's a $100 bill." He said, "Is it real?" He said, "Yeah, it's real." He said, "Thank God." I said, "I never seen that in my life." The man never seen a $100 bill, and he was in his 60s or whatever. So that's how, there was no money. That's how poor they were. But that's the people that where I lived and sold ducks. It was a way to make a living. The ducks was there, and
it was a life skill. I mean, their duck calls weren't a status symbol or sport. It was just how they lived.
That's right. Sell feathers, duck, and that's why I do that. I don't do nothing to brag about or be a big shot. It just very, very rich in heritage where I lived at, and I'm trying to showcase that. Just keep it going.
We were talking about that the other day, Dale, how I've hunted with you, Forrest and I have hunted with you down there at your family place, and we spent some time together and eating all kinds of good food, and you get to know somebody when you're hunting in a blind with them, and that's what struck me as I got to know you is you really didn't. I know you sell duck calls and pirogues, but you really didn't get in this as a business, did you? You just got into it for your love of making it.
That's right. It's a hobby. I've been making calls for years, probably 30 years, not selling calls. That's probably how old them bamboo calls are. But I give them to them old timers, them old single reeds and all. Man, they loved them. And then I quit.
Did they? Hang on. Did those old timers blow single reeds or double?
Oh
reeds?
no, it's all single reeds.
Single reeds.
Oh no, you wouldn't. They never seen a double reed. Them old timers. Them old timers I'm talking about never seen a double reed. Never heard of mossy oak. They didn't know nothing about none of that. They was very old school and lived in a swamp.
What did they use for reeds?
Well, most of them would buy a call. I'm gonna tell you, a lot of them used them old PS oats.
Yeah.
But they modified the soundboards, and they get them an extra reed. But there's a lot of people here they would make the hard rubber reeds out of an ace comb. They would they would take an ace comb.
And for y'all that don't know what an ace comb is, it's a big long black comb like you used to carry in your back pocket back in the 40s and 50s and 60s and earlier.
They would take that, file it down real thin, and you probably could get 3 reeds out of a long ace comb.
Have you ever made reeds like that?
Oh yeah, I have some I made hunt with. Sure do.
Darn.
I have one here somewhere, but I take a rasp and I rasp it down. I get it just about where I want. Then I put the file on it, and I try to get to about like a 1500s, like a thick reed, and it's a good sound, man. But I'm gonna tell you something. The ace combs they have nowadays is made different from the old school. They don't last as long. If you they split easily.
Different kind of plastic.
Different plastic. That's right. Different material. Now I have a man that's sending me some old ace combs from in the 50s or 60s. He wants that in his call, and I'm gonna use it in mine just to have some old, the whole old school stuff. But yeah, it's like a hard rubber reed, and it's very, very good sounding.
I knew a guy. One of the first calls I ever bought, single reed, from Clarendon, Arkansas. He was telling me about the first call he ever made. Just back in the old days around Clarendon, Arkansas, he would describe the ducks as just blotting out the sun when they flew over the highway. And oh boy, I'd like to have seen this call. But his first call, he had busted a broom handle at work, and somebody thrown it away, and he pulled it out and whittled it down for his insert, put it in a piece of PVC. But he told me he took an old magnetic sign that went on the side of a truck that the company he worked for and just shaved it down till it got the right buzz. But that was his duck call. It was like them old timers. It was how he used it. And so many of the boys he worked with wanted one that he ended up in the call business. Of course, by the end, but now he was old school too. He hand turned every single call.
Yeah.
And you had to blow them because they were all different,
Perhaps the old people where I come from, that duck call was like using a wrench. It was a tool. It wasn't
a hammer. It was a tool.
It was a tool, and they knew. They made it the way they could blow it. They modified it, and of course they had a lot of ducks back then that would make it down. But then I took an old man hunting one day, and he would be over 100 now, about 30 years ago, old market hunter. And I got in there at that time. I think I was blowing a duck commander. But he pulled out a fox, a single reed. I'll never forget. This old man killed all kinds of ducks at night and sold ducks in New Orleans. He pulled out it was a privilege to hunt with him. I made one hunt with him. I looked at that old fox and I said, man, I didn't think much of it. But let me tell you what, when that old man got down on it, I had goosebumps. You talk about could blow a call. He had modified it, that's what I'm saying, to his style. A lot of times if you take a fox and blow hard, it'll squeal on you. You can't get on it. This old man could get on it. And I just sit back and say, listen to that old son of a gun, boy, just could bring tears to your eyes.
My grandfather, Russell, who I give credit for getting me into this old duck hunting thing, really, he had 2 calls that I know of. One was an old Earl Dennison, which is a real foot lake style call, and it had a copper reed, a metal reed, and just real buzzy, metally sounding. And I've tried to blow it, and it don't make a noise because to make that call to make a noise, you have to drop it in a bucket and let it swell up with water. And I just refuse to do it because I'm scared to death it'll ruin it. You know what I'm saying? It's so old. Then the other call he had, and I cherish it, is an old cane call from Fox, and it still got when I found it, it still got the old white nylon survey string, that he used as a lanyard, and I'll pick it up. I'll walk past the cabin it's in, and I'll pick it up and blow it. It sounds just as ducky as any call I've ever seen. It's just a simple old cane call he paid a few dollars for back then,
Yeah. Oh, there was good calls now. Good sounding calls.
You got that metal reed right there, don't you?
Yeah. You see, this is around Gina, Catahoula. They use metal reeds.
But he's showing me a insert he made that's got a copper reed. Did you make this reed?
No, there's an old man from Jonesville. I can't think of his name. That's a crying shame. I went to one of them call shows, and he had this call. But he told me, son, I'm going to tell you what. You want to make this call. This is the best call a man could blow. But you got to get it wet first. Just what you're saying.
Yeah. You got to soak in water for some reason. That don't sound bad, but it needs soaking in water, don't it?
I think it would help it. But it's a good sounding call. But this is an old call. I can't remember. I'll have to ask a friend of mine that knows. He knows. But that is. They didn't use that in my part of the country. That's more Catahoula, Gina area. Or you go towards Memphis, Real Foot and all.
When Forrest and I came down and hunted with you down at your camp, what a beautiful place, big old break. We heard a lot of stories. We met your brothers, met your nephews, met a lot of your family. Holidays was coming, as I remember, it was right before Thanksgiving, and y'all had a bunch of family coming in. But what are some of the stories that you remember? What are some of the times hunting? I heard everybody in the camp talk about hunting with your dad a lot. What were some of the times you remember? What are some of the standout hunts and experiences? Tell me about hunting with your dad. Tell me about hunting with some of them old timers.
Oh, I'm gonna tell you. I hunted with Daddy a lot. I hunted with my dad in the '70s, before we had that place and the bean fields. He was a young man then. My daddy used to get up in the morning. Let me back up. He used to get up in the morning and go when I was about 5 years old. And I would wake up and I would beg him to take me. But it was always too cold. When I grew up, them old people didn't take kids like they do now. You had to get of age.
Yeah.
You had to get like 14, 15. And I wanted to go so bad. And he would come back home and had those ducks. And he went one day on it was sleeting, and my best friend's daddy, and they killed sacks of mallards. Just as my friend's daddy was picking them up, they was landing next to him. You couldn't run them out the hole. And this was all before I got to hunt. So I was taking all this in, and I had a heavy foundation before I got to even go hunting. Mm-hmm. Then once I started hunting, I remember the first time I went with my daddy, the first duck I killed with my daddy, I was walking in the field, and I jumped a bunch of miles. I didn't know how to call. I was a very young man. But I blew a duck call, and they come back over, and I shot, and I knocked the hen down. And I started shooting the others, and I couldn't find the hen. I didn't watch where it fell. And my dad started preaching to me, don't take it off the duck. So to make a long story short, I found it, and then we made a little blind. My dad had a cotton gin, so they had those burlap sacks that would go around the cotton bales. Mm-hmm. That's what people used in the '70s, in my day. That's what we had. So we had made a little blind, and we killed a few mallards, me and him. We had an old 1956 Willys Jeep, and I'll never forget, I think, that one afternoon, I think about once a week, and in my whole life, that was 40 years ago. And it was one of the best hunts. And my daddy was so happy. And when he come home, he drank him a few beers, and I'll never forget the bond. And it puts a smile on my face to think about it. But I had a bunch of hunts like that with him. In '89, when it froze, it had a big freeze here. We could have killed several hundred ducks easy in one hunt. And I hunted with my dad that morning. We killed our limit. It was full of ducks. We went home. We got firewood and all that. We came back, and we couldn't wait to go back the next day. But I have a picture of the last hunt. My daddy hunted till he was about 80. Well, to about 75, they slowed down. But I have a picture. He came with me when he was about 80. And the sun was setting. I took a picture of him. And I didn't know that was the last picture I'd have. But I have that picture. So I go back a long ways with my daddy, but I'm gonna tell you something.
Well, hang on before you tell me that last thing. What was your daddy's demeanor like at age 80, having grown up in that part of the world, having grown up with them folks with the old ways and shooting ducks with that bunch like you did? What was he like on the last time you hunted with him? Was he still mad at the duck, so to speak, or?
No, my daddy got very mellow, and he would keep telling those duck stories. It was in his blood, in his heart. And it's like my best friend says, you go to the camp, you hear them stories 1,000 times, but they never get old. And that he would just keep telling it, and I do it with my kids now, the same as he did. But he slowed down in his 80s. He would come to the camp to go hunting, and the next morning it'd be so cold, y'all just go ahead and go. Mm-hmm. I didn't sleep good, or he'd make excuses. But he was up in age, and he was healthy. He just done enough of it, and But I've seen him jump in a boat when there was a 3-man limit back in the late 80s. And I mean, haul butt to the blinds fast in the afternoon and kill his 3 ducks. Come back and brag about it the whole night, just 3 ducks he killed. It was in his blood. And we all like that. We go to camp, we swap it. You don't have to kill 100 ducks. It's the way you kill 3. You know, it makes a good story. So.
Well, you shoot 100 ducks these days, you might get in trouble.
Yeah, I never did shoot 100 ducks, and I don't want. No, but I'm gonna tell you something. To me, this is very important. When I grew up, I had nephews younger than me. 3 or 4 nephews I have, about 15 years younger than me. They was bringing their friends. I've witnessed this. This is very important. How to get kids into hunting. This is what I witnessed that helped. It's not just bringing them to a Ducks Unlimited show once a year or to a skeet shoot. That's fine. It's all good. You got to bring them to them camps and let them watch the old timers drink beer. Let them listen to the stories at the fireplace, because you're going to hear them stories.
That's right.
Let them see what they're eating over there. Let them hear about look at them old Model 12 double barrels. Let them watch the card game. It's the whole 9 yards. That's most of the part right there. Then you go hunting in the morning. You come back. We used to go, and my little nephews would come, and they'd sneak some beer out. I found out later there was kids, but they never did no wrong. They were so happy to go to camp, and they became big hunters. And all them young kids is what I'm telling you right now that witness all this is hunts till this day right now.
That's right.
Because they was instilled with a good upraising in the camp life. The card playing, the beer drinking, the stories. You sit around them campfires as a young man, and them old men knock off them stories, they always get big as like that. They take an interest in all that. That's what I've done, and I became a big hunter. So I think it's very important if these kids can get involved in that kind of stuff, that camp life.
Absolutely important. You want to make a kid smile, take him to camp.
Yeah, and it's not all about the killing. It's not to kill. And them kids like to kill, but it's to hear the stories.
That's right.
The duck holes. I used to kill this. I shot this many ducks right here. And I hung them here. They take all that in. They don't forget stuff like that.
That's their influence. What do you think those old timers would have thought about the last 3 or 4 months here in America with all this COVID pandemic and all this mess, Dale?
I'm going to tell you something. At the end of my dad's life, my dad was a businessman. He was into politics years ago. I mean, keep up with politics. He wasn't in the office or nothing. He watched the news and he kept up with everything. The last 5 years of his life, he quit all that. He was disgusting. And I talked to him about some things, and he said, this ain't my world no more. I'm not used to this. He said, I've seen the best part of my life in the 50s and 60s when things were, and most of them old people was like that. I don't know. It's hard for me to believe what's going on now. This country is changing so much. I don't think them old people could tolerate that, or.
I was just thinking, like I was going to come down here and meet with you months ago, and Louisiana was sealed off.
Yeah, man.
I couldn't even come in. You ain't but 3 hours from the house, and I couldn't cross the state boundary to get over here because all the politics of shutting down everything, quarantine, whatever y'all want to call it. But as you and I were talking today, I wondered about them old folks 100 years ago. This wouldn't have stopped them.
No, they had that.
It wouldn't have slowed them down a bit.
In 1918, they had that flu. They didn't stop for nothing. They kept on trucking, man. And my dad, them old people, my daddy was a tough man. And I got sick in life. I had back trouble, and he'd preach to me, just don't worry about it. Get up and go to work. It'll work out. It'll heal itself. He always told me that. If you were sick, I've seen my dad at 80-something years old, a limb fell on him and hit him on the shoulder. We went to the emergency room, and they took an x-ray. That shoulder blade, it had shattered it, and the doctor said, I've never seen a break that bad. That's the worst break I ever seen. They had to put his arm in a sling for 6 weeks where he couldn't even move it to heal. It's that little fine, flat bone in there. My dad never complained, never said he hurt. And he said, there ain't nothing to it. There ain't nothing wrong with me. When they took that band, that I never heard till this day, he's dead now, he never complained about that shoulder. He was raised like that. He was tough. And he is still down in us. If we got hurt, there ain't nothing wrong with you. If you think about it, something's going to be wrong. Get it out your mind. That's how most of the people were. Because they grew up at a time. My dad never went to the doctor till he was in the army.
Really?
And when they told him to get naked for his physical, he didn't want. They didn't never do that growing up. You know?
He'd never been undressed in front of nobody.
Never
like
been undressed, and he didn't know what to think about that. The old people was very sheltered, back then, and until this day. Well, till he died, he didn't go to the doctor and he went many times. I'm gonna tell you, he went about 25 years ago. He had a headache. He went to Ochsner's in New Orleans. The doctor wanted to drill a hole in his head to take a biopsy. He told the doctor, said, you want to drill a hole, drill it in your head. I'm going home.
Yeah.
Ramsey, he came home, and there was never an issue again about that. And he didn't die from that. And so he didn't believe. A lot of people go to the doctor tell you stuff, and you keep going. You listen to him, you're going to keep going every week, to somewhere. He didn't believe. I'm like that. I don't go to the doctor unless I have to go. It's very seldom I go. So I think them old people was tough. If they died of natural causes, that's the way it goes, but
that's just the way it went.
Right.
Have you ever done some of that stuff, like make feather pillows and feather mattresses, like them old timers? They didn't just kill a duck and pick him whole and eat it. I mean, they used everything, didn't they? The feathers and everything.
I got a pirogue seat. I want to get it. I'll show you. I made out of moss, a moss seat.
Really?
The old people, there was a big, Louisiana and Florida was the biggest states that manufactured moss in probably late 1800s to about in the 1960s, about 1960. But in the 30s, it was really booming. And Louisiana and Florida, they would pick moss. When you pick moss, you gotta put it somewhere and age it. If you age moss in the winter, it takes probably 6 months to cure. You can't do it. You gotta do it in the summer.
How about Spanish moss?
Right, Spanish moss. You gotta put it in a pile. The best thing to put it in a barrel with no bottom. It's gotta be on the ground in the summer. You wet it so often, and you keep turning it about every 3 days. And it's gonna rot. It's gonna turn black and rot. It'll just be that string.
Huh.
And you gotta shake it, clean all the sticks, wash it, hang it up to dry. And that's what people put in automobile seats and the Model A's and all. My grandma used that in all her beds. And the old ladies would, once a year, undo the mattress, fluff it up, hang it on the fence and stuff it back. They did that once a year. Over here in Louisiana. Yes, sir. So I'll make some moss pillows, not to sleep with, but like for my pirogue seats and stuff, just because of how they done it. But I learned that from the old people. And I make my own pillows, duck pillows. At one time I had 30 sacks of duck feathers. And my wife was complaining because I had them in the storeroom. And I made pillows, so I wanted to get rid of them. So I put in a market bulletin that I'd give them away. And this lady called me. She was teaching a home ec class for them girls. She said, man, I'm teaching a class. That would go good to make pillows. I said, I'll tell you what. She said, what you want for them? So I tell you what you do. You pay the shipping, I'm going to send them to you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, my wife was on me. I had 30 sacks hanging. She couldn't walk it. You got to store that in a dark room for 1 year.
You got to store them in a dark room.
When you pluck a duck, you got to take, I'm going to tell you something. The best pillows comes off of a gray duck. They're thick in the breast. You can't use a Darwin duck for pillows. You got to use a puddle duck. Mallows is good. I'll use teals, everything. It takes 180 to 200 ducks to make one pillow.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And it takes 50. If you kill wood ducks, mallards, teals, it takes 50 ducks to make 1 pound of feathers plucked. Now you're using just the breast. I would pluck them, and if they got blood on them, if there's 1 or 2 with blood, I don't keep them. But if half of them are bloody, I put them in a bucket and I put some Dawn soap and I wash them. I rinse them out and real good, and then I leave them there till the next day and I fluff them up. I put them in a crawfish sack because the air can get through it. Fluff them up. Then you got to put them in a dark room for a year. They have it. Now, this whole French people told me this, now, from what I learned. They have a little wax on the end of the feather. And it takes it takes a long time. It takes a year for that to cure. For the it just takes.
You don't wash it off. It just let it cure.
No, you can't wash that off. And that's right. What I'm telling you, this is an old remedy that I got where I grew up. You put it in a dark room. A lot of people put it in paper bags in the attic. A lot for that leg pearl. But I'll put mine in my storeroom. It's dark in there, and I leave it about a year. And then you can make. I use that old gray stroppy cloth, and you can still get that at Walmart. And make pillows. You talk about comfortable.
It made me. I had not thought about this in probably 40 years until you started talking about those feather pillows. But as a child growing up, I had my great grandmother's one of her old feather pillows. And it was so flat and so lost all its loft. I used it as on top of my regular pillow, you know. But I used to love carrying that thing to summer camp because it wasn't much to it, just kind of thin and flimsy. But when you got in a pillow fight, all them feathers would go down the end, and it was like swinging a bowling ball. I could knock a guy flat on his back with that pillow. And I was always a champion with that old feather. You know, doing that right there. And I guess we still got it somewhere at the house. I hadn't seen it in a while. My mother may have it.
Rather than tell you something. I had an old lady tell me that it'll get flat. You grab each end like an accordion, and you play it like an accordion. And it'll get everything in line again. And then you go to, you know.
I'm going to go find that pillow and do that.
You do that with it several times. It fluffs it up inside. But I'm gonna tell you something. It does. After so many years, it does get flat. But you got to fluff it up. But I'll use it. It's so comfortable. When I go hunting down south or go to camp, that pillow comes with me everywhere I go. I don't sleep with nobody else's pillow. I bring my feather pillow everywhere I go.
Everywhere you go.
And my old grandma's quilt. I still sleep with that everywhere I go. I bring my old.
Is it down also?
No, it's just an old
quilt.
Yeah, it's so old, it's unbelievable. It's thin. Just knowing where it comes from and all that and how it feels, I can sleep like a baby most of the time. But it's just getting the older I get, the more I like just sleeping with my own pillow and my own.
You sleep better that way.
That's right.
That's what I ought to try. As much as I travel, it just bring my own pillow or my own blanket or something.
I'll bring it everywhere I go, and I don't have no trouble.
That would sure make the world a lot better. That's one thing I have not missed about the last 3 or 4 months. I really I miss traveling. I really do. It's just so much of what we do in my work. But I hadn't missed being home for 4 months. It's getting comfortable with my bed and my pillow and my blanket and my home and my dinner table. That's been a nice thing.
Well, you've been on the go so much, and you work and all. I'm sure it is nice to have a chance to stay home. That's one advantage of this virus. You get to give you a good chance with your wife and kids to regroup, stay home, and enjoy life a little bit. I did. It makes a bond, like.
It does. It's been good. Did it interrupt y'all's work up there where you work?
Not really. We stayed home about 2 weeks. And at this time of the year, we're not really busy with that. I mean, they don't have no harvest stuff going on. But we back at work. We just stayed 2 weeks off. And it's just mostly farmers coming there and looking at the market and maybe selling a few beans here and there. But it didn't really affect us much.
I know driving over, once I got off 20 and started heading south, the crop looked good.
Very good. They could use a little rain now, but they've been hitting the rains good. The bean crop looks good. It's just not a strong market for anything. For the market could be better, and I don't know how that's going to turn out.
Tell me, one of the most interesting projects. Your cane calls are amazing, but the pirogues, that you were showing me one just a little while ago, and start to finish, because you know, like pirogue I'm getting is just basically cypress lumber put together and formed up, but you do something a little bit different. I just find that amazing. It's not one I can pick up. Your pirogues I can't just pick up and throw on top of my shoulder and go.
No.
You got a little weight in there.
I'm gonna tell you something. Yeah, you can. They made dugouts. This boat I made is out of a tree, a dugout, and that tree was 30 inches across in the middle, and it was 18 feet long, and it didn't have no branches, which was good. You don't want no knots in there. I had a good log to start with. Now what you got to do? You got to find. Say my boat's 14 inches thick, from the top to the bottom. I'll go to the smallest end of that log, and I got me a jig I made 14 inches thick, and I nailed that to that log. I'll find the widest part of that log, turning and measuring. Once I do that, I roll it to where I want. Then I put that, it might be 3 foot wide, but 14 inches tall, or the plywood say. I put that on the small end. You gotta have a 20-inch bottom on a pirogue.
Mm-hmm.
And I put that on a small end, and it takes about 4 hours, preparation and all. But if on that small end, if it's big enough, you know darn well it's going to be big enough on the other end, because the big end. So what I do, I put that on there, and that's this boat here, I cut it out myself by hand. I blocked out the top and the bottom, and I ended up with a 14-inch block. Then my boys helped me with a commalone. I turned it upside down. You got to make your bottom first. So when you're digging it, your bottom's finished, you know how thick to go.
I see.
So I made the bottom, then I turned it over, and I take a molding and to make my nose block. It's a lot of measuring, and it's hard to explain, but you got to put numbers and measure it so it all come out symmetrical. And then once you get all that, you cut off the extra blocks. I did mine behind mostly. I have a foot adze, a big axe, and a passepartout saw I use. Mm-hmm. I did it old school mostly, but it took me 2 months, and it came out. My boat is heavy, but I left it heavy on purpose, because I looked at a lot of dugouts in my life in South Louisiana, and they made some you could pick up a person and walk with. But the problem is, if you leave that in the water in the sun, the lighter they are, the more risk you have on splitting. Mm-hmm. So you leave them a little on the heavy end, you get out of that risk. And I sure don't want to do all that work in my boat splits. But you can get a man on each end to move my boat. You can't haul it by yourself. But this boat I built was a little over 14 feet long. And my other boat was about 13, I guess. So I wanted to build something a little longer. I got a 20-inch bottom, and it's an old French, colonial French pattern I got for the bottom.
Well, you were telling me that. Who gave you the pattern, and how old is it? I mean, you were telling me that's a very old pattern.
It's a style that, and I know we're talking on here. I'd have to show you and write it down for you. It's a bunch of measurements that go on the bottom of that log. When that log is turned, when you're working on the bottom, you got to get some chalk lines, some rulers, and just start popping lines and measuring. And this noses out your boat so it paddles good. And this is a pattern. They got an old film out. It's called the Pirogue Maker on Folk Stream. Oh. It's about a 14-minute film. If you watch
Stream.
Yeah. But if you Google the Pirogue Maker, something will pop up. It's probably a minute or two long. You want to watch the 14-minute version. They make a dugout in Pierre Port in South Louisiana. This is in the 1940s. It's an amazing film to watch. This is how I built mine. But you see them draw that pattern on there. That's the same pattern I use. You need to watch that. It's very educational.
You say it dated back to when? 1700s?
It's dated back. The French people came to Louisiana in the 1700s, early 1700s. My people. The French, that's colonial French, from France to here. I'm considered a Creole French, colonial French. They came. My people came in the 1720s, both sides.
Some of the French Canadians, remind me about history about this, because I know we hunt up in Nova Scotia, and I had no idea of this part of history until I got to talking to my guide up there, and he was saying, well, yeah, a lot of folks in South Louisiana, the French had Quebec, because they still speak French up in Quebec, and he said, but a lot of the French up in that part of the world got in a beef with the British up in Nova Scotia, and to get rid of them, they load them up in boats and dropped them off at the end of the world down in South Louisiana. Now, what's the distinction in that? That's what he was telling me.
They went to Nova Scotia in the 1600s, these French settlement. They all come from France, the same place my ancestors came. They went for better life to a new world, to Nova Scotia, where the British tried to take over this country in the 1700s. And the British wanted them to adapt to their religion and to do what they, under their rules.
Accept their rule, yeah.
And these Canadian French people said, we're not doing that. So this is about 1755. They went there, they burned their houses, they burned their barns, they loaded them up on ships, they took the kids away, they spread the family out, and they shipped them all over. They shipped them out of Nova Scotia throughout the United States. There's a lot of French people in Kansas City, all over up north. Canada, they spread out. But most of them found their way down the East Coast and through the Mississippi River, ended up in Louisiana. Now, the thing about that is, the French people already came here 50 years ago, which would be my ancestors. New Orleans was made in the around 1718.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Natchitoches was 1714. These cities was established by French people.
Way before signing the Declaration of Independence.
That's right. Now, these Cajuns came, it was around 1755 when they got thrown out. So they came over here. I'm not a Cajun. I'm a colonial French.
Okay.
They call us Creole French.
What's the difference?
When you come
from an outsider looking in,
no,
I don't know how to call who what down here.
Creole French is when you come from a mother like France and you're born in Louisiana.
All right.
You become Creole French. Cajun French when you come from Nova Scotia.
Got you.
So what they done, all this big stuff in Louisiana about Cajun this, Cajun that. Everybody wants to be a Cajun.
Yeah.
That's fine. But when they come to Louisiana, I'm going to tell you something. I did my research. They was making gumbos already over here, them other French people.
Right.
They adopted them. They showed them how to work. They showed them. I don't want to get people, but they already got that thing, the ball rolling.
Right.
Now, they bought their way of cooking and come here and their, farming ways. And it all it's a big melting pot,
That's right.
Everybody. Now, I have some Richard LeBlancs in me. I have a little bit of Cajun, but most of my people is from straight France Creole. Right.
Creole.
So, but it all.
I've always wanted that distinction, and I had no idea what the difference in a Cajun, a true Cajun historically, and a Creole was. It's so used interchangeably down here. Now, I'm gonna throw a monkey wrench into spokes. What's a coonass?
A coonass is any French person. That would be considered a Cajun or like me. They just call them coonasses.
Would that apply to just about any Louisianan past a certain point, north and south?
That's right. Any French. Some people get offended by it.
Well, you see all this mess going on TV this day and age, and people get their feelings hurt about all kinds of stuff. But redneck and coonass and Cajun, folks wear it like a badge of honor.
It don't bother me at all what you call me.
Yeah.
Some people are proud of that, but you're right. You're so right. But I'm considered a coonass. It's just a funny token they call. But anyway, I love it all. I love my heritage and where I'm from, and I consider I'm a blessed person.
Dale, why do you think it's important to you? Why is it important to you to make things purely from hand the old way? It's got to be. I mean, no right and wrong. I'm just saying, why? Why is it important to you?
I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna answer you right here real quick. If I spent 2 months making a boat that I made because my ancestors done it that way, and I'm carrying that tradition on, it means a whole lot more when I go pick up a duck than if I just went and bought one and paid $500 for it, and I have no history on it. That does nothing for me.
What do you think? It's almost like your ancestors are speaking to you through your hand tools. I wonder how it's going to speak to your great-great-grandkids, that boat.
Well, I hope they can pick it up. But I'm going to tell you something. When I paddled that boat to my blind, people you might think I'm crazy. I got a jug of coffee with me. Every morning, halfway to the blind, I stop and I toast to all the ones before me and the ancestors and whoever. And I drank a sip and I go into the blind. When I do that, half my duck hunt is done. The sun didn't even come up yet, and I'm already accomplished. It's a personal thing.
I think I never duck hunted with my grandfather. I went to blind with him some as a child. Went to duck camp over in Arkansas with him on work days, building duck blinds and doing stuff like that. But like you articulated earlier, back my granddad's era just didn't take children to the duck blind. I took mine. Man, the minute they were potty trained, off we go to camp. They didn't do that. You had to be. He did take me dove hunting. That was different, I guess, to them. As we'd go out dove hunt 8, 9, 10 years old. You were able to shoot. You're off somewhere you couldn't hurt nobody. And if you shot a low bird or something stupid like that, but duck camp wasn't that. That duck blind was different then. You had to be able to swing a shotgun and use it and kill something, I guess. And he kind of got out, and I faded, so I never hunted with him. But I find myself really, maybe as I get older especially, I find myself kind of connecting to the stories I remember and his presence and his influence when I'm in a duck blind, when I'm shooting that old shotgun of his. I've got a few calls here, just a couple of little mementos, little souvenirs and stuff I found along the way, some old decoys of his. And I don't know, I struggle to articulate why connecting to my ancestors like that is so deadgum important. And it really is important to me.
When I was 20 years old, it wasn't. But I had the desire to kill everything I seen back then.
We all did.
Like most kids. And I was hunting the north winds that hit you in the face, the first north winds. I'm going to tell you something. It's just like a duck knows when to migrate down south when the winds shift. When that north wind hit me in the face and when I was a young man, it just fired me up so much. It kindled the fire. I was ready to go hunting and I still do this. I still have that urge, and I still do the same thing as we speak right now. Everything goes around duck hunting, and I spray. Right now, I'm spraying water lilies once a week. I've been doing that for 30 years. I'm gonna tell you something, Ramsey. Listen to what I'm telling you. It's very important. I don't know how many people that have a spot and kill ducks. And said, man, next year, I'm going to make that son of a gun. I'm going to do this. I'm going to clean it up. And they ruined it.
Yep, I've seen it.
I can tell you stories and stories. You know what I do? I've been hunting the same spot 34 years. The same tree. I know what I have to do. I've done this a long time ago. When I kill 500-600 ducks, I look at the environment. While I'm hunting, I'm gonna need to leave this. I want to. I want to leave it like it is, not add or take away, because it's a reason those ducks are
There's
coming.
a reason
there.
those ducks coming in there like that.
So that is just like this year, that's a mass that floated behind us. I got a big slough behind my blind, and that one of them storms pushed it out. Well, now I have to clean it out. I got to spray all those floating mats. It should be good, but I'm worried it's going to hurt my duck hunt. My boys think, oh, it's going to be all right, this and that. They don't know what I've seen, though. It could change the arrow, looks on it. So that's what I'm worried about. So I'm not wanting to make anything better. I want to make it the same.
Keep it the same.
Keep it the same.
Nature's always changing. Yeah, nature's always changing. We think of it but it's not. Nature's always changing.
That's right.
And I've been in arguments with all kinds of folks over this in the past. Is what you can keep it the same. You can do stuff, but rarely can we affect a good duck hole better than the hands of God.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So I try to keep it. If it's nasty, leave it nasty. I have a bunch of those big volets they call those big locust pies, whatever. I'll leave them.
We call them yonk pins back home. Yeah. What about the ones to get the big seed head, pepper shaker seed
Right,
heads
right.
on top? Yeah.
Now I'll spray, and I'll use them for my advantage. I'll funnel them to my blind and leave them on the sides. Ducks don't like to land in them. They like to land in the open, but they'll land in them late in the season, like pirogue and all. But a day in and a day out, I keep it clean. So I kind of use them to my advantage. So, they don't hurt nothing, and it works out good like that. I try to use the environment and everywhere I can to help me kill ducks. And
That's the whole point, yeah.
hunting the same place, as long as I know what I have to do. Now, a new spot, you have to hunt it several years to see what the ducks like. You got to change things to make it. You can always put a rabbit out of a hat, and if you have some property you own. I mean, but it might take a while changing this, changing that, but you can always kill duck. I learned that too from them old people.
Folks, I appreciate y'all listening. We're going to be back next week with Dale again. The old ways, connecting with the past. I just find this kind of stuff fascinating. Louisiana has a rich and colorful history as a sportsman's paradise. It's got a lot of tradition. Hardly does the subject of duck hunting come up that South Louisiana, that Louisiana doesn't come up in the conversation or doesn't come to mind. At least in my part of the world, it doesn't. We just. But anyway, thank y'all for listening. Duck season somewhere. See y'all next time.